Florida's two halves, 1,350 miles of coastline, wetlands that feed entire ecosystems, beaches that show up in every travel magazine, and nearly 23.5 million people, almost all of them packed in the same corner of the state. Florida is genuinely beautiful. It's also genuinely strange, because if you look at the population density map, the south is bursting and north is almost empty, and that gap doesn't happen by accident. Florida runs nearly 500 miles north to south, 460 miles across at its widest. The whole thing sits low, dangerously low. At its highest point, Burton Hill tops out at 345 feet above sea level. That's the lowest high point of any US state. Beneath the surface, the foundation is porous limestone, the kind that feeds underground rivers and springs, but also makes it terrain prone to sinkholes, especially in the north and central parts of the state. The ground here has a habit of disappearing without warning. More than 1,350 miles of coastline wrap around it, more than any other state in the lower 48. The Atlantic side, barrier islands and shifting sands. The Gulf side, wide continental shelves, salt marshes, thick mangroves. Rich in biodiversity, exposed to flooding, erosion, and storms that don't ask permission. The climate cuts the state cleanly in two. South Florida is tropical, warm, humid, stormy year-round. Northern Florida feels like a different place entirely. Cooler winters, drier air, heavy spring rains. Frost shows up occasionally, snow isn't impossible, the temperature swings are wider and so is the landscape. Rolling hills, pine forests, springs so clear they don't look real. Rivers like the St. John's defy the obvious and run north instead of south. The land is less urban, more spread out, and far more southern in character than most people expect. It looks more like Georgia than Miami. And that difference in land, water, and weather is exactly what shaped where those 23.5 million people decided to go, and where they didn't. Florida is the third most populous state in the country. But look at the map and the imbalance is immediate. The south is packed, the north is not. Northern Florida, especially the Panhandle, looks almost like a different world, wide, open, and sparsely settled. Part of that comes down to what the coastline actually looks like. Southern Florida has the postcard beaches, white sand, turquoise water, and the kind of coast that ends up in airline ads. Much of the Panhandle shoreline is marshy, muddy, and wetland-lined, ecologically vital, not exactly where people picture retirement. Fewer tourists came, and fewer people stayed. The South also had ports, Miami, Tampa, Fort Lauderdale, all built around deep water harbors, cruise terminals, and navigable rivers connected to global trade. The Panhandle sat close enough to New Orleans, at the mouth of the Mississippi, that it was never developed as a major maritime hub of its own. No ports meant no railroads, no highways, no industrial momentum. Where the South boomed, the North stayed rural. That early gap still echoes today. Proximity to a bigger port doesn't slow growth, it can freeze it. The Panhandle has been economically overshadowed by New Orleans for over 2 centuries, and that shadow is still visible on the population map. The South built everything: Miami, Tampa, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, all of them exploded through the 20th century on trade, tourism, aerospace, and eventually tech. Orlando had no coastline and still figured it out. Citrus grew first, then the Florida land boom, then the Kennedy Space Center, then Walt Disney World. A metro of 2.7 million followed. Miami now anchors a metro of 6.1 million, the 8th largest in the country. Tampa sits at 3.2 million. Jacksonville, the North's biggest city, is a legitimate regional hub with a strong port and a diverse economy. But even as the state's fourth largest metro, it clocks at 1.6 million. It's still far smaller than the urban giants in the south. Out in the Panhandle, Pensacola has around 510,000 people. Tallahassee, the state capital, just over 300,000. Climate pulled migration in the same direction. South Florida's year-round warmth became a magnet for retirees and sun-seekers from across the country and the world. Northern Florida, with its cooler winters and wider seasonal swings, never carried the same tropical appeal. Immigration patterns followed that climate line directly. South Florida's proximity to the Caribbean and Latin America made it something more than just warm. It became culturally distinct. Today, over 20% of the Floridians speak Spanish. Miami-Dade feels more Latin American than most places on the continent. That diversity feels gross, the kind that compounds over decades and becomes self-reinforcing. You've been here long enough to know this is worth subscribing to. Come on. There is one more quiet driver behind Florida's growth, and it's not birth. Florida has actually seen negative natural population growth in some years, meaning more people died than were born. It's not youth fueling this state, it's migration, retirement, and lifestyle. People over 50, mostly, looking for a different kind of life. Florida now has the highest percentage of residents over 65 of any state in the country. That number matters more than it looks. It changes what the growth means and what the state is actually being asked to handle. Which brings up a question nobody thought to ask in 1819. Why does Florida even have the Panhandle? Back in the early 1800s, that strip of land was part of Spanish West Florida. By 1810, American settlers were frustrated enough under Spanish rule that the US started asserting control. The Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819 closed it out. Spain handed over all of Florida, Panhandle included. Florida became a US territory in 1821, a full state in 1845, and those borders were already set. Alabama became a state 2 years earlier in 1819 and never seriously challenged Florida's claim. Honestly, there wasn't much reason to. At the time, the Panhandle had no major ports, no booming industry, no bustling coastal cities. It was, and it still is, a quieter, less developed corner of the state. Hundreds of miles south, a different story was playing out. Cities bursting with people, culture, and commerce. The South had beaches, ports, and international identity. But this success came at a cost, because while northern Florida may be underpopulated, southern Florida may be too populated. Florida has more than 4,000 species, found nowhere else on Earth. Its ecosystems, the Everglades, the coastal wetlands, the mangrove systems, generate billions in tourism revenue and support tens of thousands of jobs. But the same growth that made South Florida a destination has been steadily dismantling what made it worth visiting. Roads expand, forests get cleared, entire neighborhoods get built on a land that used to belong to panthers, manatees, and countless native species. Organizations like Miami's Pelican Harbor, Seabird Station have reported rising numbers of injured wildlife, particularly in urban corridors where animals now share space with infrastructure built on top of where they used to live. And it doesn't stop there. As the population continues to rise, so does the exposure to climate risk. Sea level rise is pushing younger residents inland. Older, more vulnerable population remain along the coast, the same coast that's getting more dangerous every decade. That shift presents a whole new kind of problem. Raising homes to protect against flooding means stairs, structural changes, and real physical demands. For Florida's aging population, that's not just inconvenient, it's a genuine safety issue. Florida built its identity on coastal living, then filled that coast with the population least equipped to adapt when the coast starts pushing back. The Panhandle is quiet, stable, and ecologically intact. South Florida is dynamic, crowded, and is slowly consuming the resources that built it. Florida's population gap isn't just about where people live, it's about the future of the state itself. It's about what gets built and what gets protected. Because in Florida, the divide between North and South was never just about population. It was always about priorities. 1,350 miles of coastline, 23.5 million people, and a geography that was always going to have the final say. I'm really happy that you watched till the end of the video. You are a part of the family now, so subscribe.